Well, Gripedo, my product, is actually the tool is a byproduct of my overall experience throughout my life. And the biggest portion of it is martial arts, not just Sambo, Judo, Sambo, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and wrestling. But I absolutely love Sambo. It is fun. Compared to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Judo, there's so many things you can do. I absolutely love it.
What got you into it? What was it? Was it just the circumstance or fun?
I was a judo coach. Well, my journey with Sambo started when I was really young. I grew up in Turkey. I was born in U.S. We moved to Turkey for good when I was 7 years old, and we stayed around until I was 18. And for college, I came back. But from 7 to 18, while I was in Turkey, I did judo. And Turkey, the national sport is wrestling. They have, they're really good at grappling. But we lived in a small town called Antalya, and I don't know if you've ever been there. It's a beautiful beach city that has blown up the last 10 years. But
I haven't, man.
Yeah, there's a lot of Eastern Europeans and Russians. They love going there, and it's a great places for athletes to have coaches that have their camps there for athletes. For me, it was really, I absolutely loved learning judo there because I was exposed to other Eastern European grappling methods such as Sambo. It was like early 90s. We had one gentleman named Dennis, short, super stocky guy, and really, really strong. And it was strange. He would actually brag that he doesn't lift any weights. But I saw how he trains, and he does the calisthenics, and what he does, it's just phenomenal. But that was like when I first heard about Sambo, and my judo coach was trying to explain to me what it was and how it is. And he started teaching me some Sambo techniques that I could use, and those were the techniques that were unorthodox for judo players, but he showed me the legal ones. That's where it started. But years later, when I was coaching, I had a student that would go compete at Sambo tournaments, and he kept winning. He was 7, 8 times national champion, and then he did I think he went to the Worlds, and I think he placed at third at one, and I think the Pan Ams he won. He was really successful. I think he might have over 15 national titles. But,
wow.
It just, I knew he was, I helped him prepare for it, but then one day I was like, you know what, look, I want to go compete, and they changed the rules of judo, and Sambo basically was the old school judo that I was used to, so I was like, I just want to go and do it. It was a nationals, and I didn't even really do a good job learning the rules, and I made some mistakes early matches, but luckily I caught up. It's not that different from judo, so it's fairly easy to pick up.
Sambo's not different from judo?
Well, my coach,
because doesn't it involve striking?
Well, there's combat Sambo, and there's regular Sambo. Regular Sambo is similar to judo. They wear a jacket. They just wear shorts. Judo, they changed the rules a while back, and you're no longer allowed to go for legs. So it kind of became like Greco-Roman wrestling. You're just attacking the upper body. So when I grew up, I learned old school judo where you could attack the legs, and Sambo allows that. So when you compare Sambo to old school judo, the only difference is pretty much leg locks. And one day my coach was saying, Sambo's pretty much judo leg locks. He made a joke. And then I was like, well, I should be able to fairly pick it up. Plus, I trained with a really good Sambo guy when I was a kid. I didn't go in depth, but I picked up techniques, so I was somewhat familiar with it. The tournament was fairly close by, and I was like, let me go do it. And but I showed up that day. It's supposed to be the Sambo Nationals, and I'm there, and they actually declared it to be U.S. Open because they had almost maybe 100 athletes that flew in that did not know English, and a lot of them are Eastern European, and they're really good at it. So I was getting quite nervous when I was warming up, because a lot of the guys were really good. Some did it full time. There was in my weight class, they announced that there was one Olympian. Some was not an Olympic sport, so I assume it's like a wrestler or a judo guy. But they also said there was one world champion. in my weight class when I was warming up, and I was like, okay, it's gonna be a long day. But
So if you were to well, what would be more, I guess, what would be more applicable in like in an actual street fight? Would it be Sambo or Judo?
well,
Or would it be competitive Sambo like you were
well,
mentioning before?
if you're doing combat Sambo, that would be awesome because you know how to strike, you know how to kick.
Yeah.
I think actually years ago I told my buddy Leo, and I totally forgot I told him this, but I told him it's like, man, I would really love to see like a Dagestani grappler compete in UFC because being in the grappling world and being close to that region, I know those guys are super tough. They've been just really tough. Um, Especially like Chechnya, and but from that Dagestani region, a lot of guys are really tough. Years later, he called me and he was like, "Man, there's you're right. There's this guy Khabib. He's destroying people. And then he's like, there's another guy. He's like suplexing everybody. And now there's a few guys, Makaev, Kamsat, Chimaev. They're just going through people. And honestly, I think in the 90s, Russia was even like, I think MMA, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu came up a really long way the last 20 years in US. But in the 90s, Russia was really ahead, I think, in Sambo, Judo, compared to the rest of the world. Well, they were always going head to head with Japan, but they were really good. But it's, to me, I'm still surprised. Like now, they're still really great. I'm still seeing some of these guys just go through athletes in UFC. They're just really unstoppable. But yeah, I was telling my buddy, these guys are great grapplers. They do combat Sambo, so they know how to strike a little bit. I think they'll do really good. And he was calling me, telling me how I nailed it. I didn't actually remember it till later.
I just think that like the Russians are just bred different, and a lot of that area, I mean, look at the Olympic weightlifters, like one of my favorites, Dmitry Kloklov, that guy, he's just built different. And, they start training at like what, 12, 11, 10 years old, who knows? And so it becomes like, it goes back to like developing a skill, really, like really refining just one thing, like being good at one thing. And we in the U.S., we have the capability and the ability to be able to really experiment with a myriad of things. But the thing that I, and yourself included, like I'm an immigrant. I'm not from here. I was born here, but I was raised in Beirut and Lebanon. And even that mentality, coming here to the United States culturally and, with my family, it was always like just work and figure something out and get good at it. And there's no time to be lazy. There's no time to be this, be that. Obviously, you got to have a childhood to some extent. It's not like we were, in the middle of a war zone, like my parents were. However, having that experience of tenacity and grit to be able to beat through competition, in the sense that I may not be the smartest, I may not be the most talented, but I will outwork you, period. And it's that discipline mentality. And we've just become so soft as a society. We've become more Epicurean, less stoic. And stoicism, I think people tend to misunderstand, and thinking that, well, you just have to be tough. Tough doesn't mean you're going to go have big arms and muscles. Tough is mentally tough. Like, what can you withstand? If you're going to get knocked down, are you going to get back up again? If somebody says X, Y, and Z about you, are you going to let that defeat you and you're going to start defeating yourself, or are you going to figure out a solution no matter what? Like 2020 was like a great representation of that. It allowed a lot of people to either fall over and accept money from the government or pivot and figure out a solution. There was a statistic that was, I don't want to mislead anybody here, but it was a relatively high number, I think in the like 30, 40, 50%, where people started quitting their jobs, or people that quit their jobs never went back to their jobs because they figured out side hustles. And those side hustles became business ventures. And those businesses started growing exponentially in 2021. And so it's funny, like when your back is up against a wall and you have zero options, you have to put food on the table, you have to put a roof over your family's heads. What are you going to do? Are you just going to buckle down? You're going to figure something out. We live in a world where technology is out of your fingertips. You could literally make money out of nothing, thin air, and you have that possibility to do so. And I think that's, this is something to think about. And I love that. But going back to what we were talking about with Sambo martial arts, is that what led you to developing this phenomenal product, which I'm so sorry. I still have to get it. I used to be really, really adamant about my grip training. I had a Jeet Kune Do and a Muay Thai background back when I was younger, and grip training was like all that I did. I didn't train really my other body other than calisthenics, and now it's like the reverse. The things that are important, like grip strength, ankle strength, mobility, things like that, I don't do. But tell me, what led you to developing this? Was it just the fact that you were in that world and in that environment and you found a need and you just fulfilled it?
So when I started training in Turkey, especially training with the Russians, Eastern Europeans, and that coach that did Sambo, his name was Dennis. One of the things I realized how important grip is, especially for Judo at that time. They changed the rules over the years, but at that time, you could fully grip fight, and there's very little limitations in Judo. And I realized...
What do you mean by grip fight? Sorry to interrupt you, but just for the audience.
So
yeah, what do you mean by grip fighting?
I'll start with Judo. For the audience that doesn't know Judo, it's pretty much like wrestling. You're wearing a jacket. It's a Japanese grappling sport. And it involves throws, mainly standing, but on the ground you can do chokes and arm locks. But probably like 80%, 90% is standing. And that changed over the years, depending on how the rules evolved and how the sport really evolved too with that. So what, you're fighting with the jacket and you're holding the jacket to throw someone. So in a situation like that, the weakest link can be where you're gripping. If you're not gripping the jacket strong, you can't pull. And that can apply to a lot of different sports with a lot of different things, which I can give examples later. But for Judo, it was really important to have a strong grip. If the rest of your body's really strong and your hands are not strong, it's going to really limit for you to do a Judo throw. The second thing is setups. There's different ways to set up for throws, but the most important thing was, at least for me, and I think for the game, was at that time, being able to grip fight, to be able to deflect your opponent's hands, hold it down and get the grip you want, make sure he doesn't get the grip he wants to throw you. And if you get the grip you want, you can control the angles you have on your opponent. You can control the type of throws you want. And if you can prevent your opponent from gripping you, he's not going to be able to throw you. So I came to a breakthrough when I was a low-level belt. I don't know when exactly, but through that journey, I realized if I don't let my opponent grip me, I don't care how strong he is. I don't care how good his conditioning is. I don't care if he has the best technique in the world, such as like Uchimata, which is like a classic Judo throw, and there's some Japanese players that are phenomenal with it. But if I can make sure he doesn't get the grip he wants, it's very unlikely he's going to be able to throw me. And of course, there's some, there was a recent athlete in the Olympics, he can get Uchimata from any grip, but most athletes are not going to be able to. And when I realized that, I just started focusing on grip, and it was like a hack in the game. It helped me beat athletes better than me technique-wise, strength-wise. When I was 13, 14, my coach would have me train with like the 18 and above team, and I just had to find ways to, I was getting my butt kicked over and over, but I just had to find ways, like, what do I do to catch up with these guys? And that's where my interest started in grip. When I came to U.S., I studied, I went to Catholic University. I studied biomedical engineering. And under biomedical engineering, I focused on biomechanics. I focused on bioinstrumentation. I focused on biooptics, which all are quite different. But I like taking biomechanics classes because I love martial arts. I loved how the human body functions, and it was fairly easy for me to understand, and I really enjoyed it. And then I did my master's, and in my master's I focused on biooptics. I finished my master's, and I got back into competing again. I couldn't compete as much when I was in school, but once I started competing again, I had a really bad elbow injury, a tennis elbow. I was actually going against a Eastern European athlete. His last name was Klokov, similar to Dmitry Klokov you mentioned. Um, never forget that name because he had me on an arm bar, and I heard something snap, and my elbow has never been the same. After that, I started going back, looking at, what I learned from biomechanics, going to physical therapy, and I started thinking, what could I do for recovery and rehab? And that's how the Gripedo sand training came together. That's how all of it started.
So you started it with the sand, but now your application can be literally on anything. Like you could put it on the end of a barbell, and you could do, reverse wrist curls, and then you could also, I've seen videos where they've attached it to like implements to do like pinch grip strength.
Mm-hmm.
So for time,
yeah,
right, which I think is phenomenal. One thing that you mentioned after you broke or you got your elbow messed up during the fight, that you started focusing on grip strength. It's funny because the moment that I started having elbow tendonitis, I will go back to strengthening wrist flexors and my forearms. Mm-hmm. And the moment that I start strengthening my forearms and my hands and my fingers, the elbow pain starts to go away. It's funny how that tends to work out like that. I wanted to ask, for someone that's just recreationally training, that isn't maybe in martial arts, and they just want to have like preventative, like osteoporosis or carpal tunnel syndrome or anything like that, how would you, like, what would you put this in? Like, let's say they exercise, 3 or 4 days a week. They're just a general, physical fitness. Where would you throw this in? Would you throw it in on a day where you are training, or just like as an accessory, a different day whenever you've got time, and for how long?
Well, I see a lot of elbow injuries with a lot of folks, and I think it's because anyone, if you're lifting and you're doing sports, you're constantly, your elbows are getting a lot of use from the gripping. And now you see people doing heavy deadlifts, farmer carries, and if they're doing a sport like jiu-jitsu, grappling, or rock climbing, or really a lot of sports, and when you combine it, it can put a lot of stress on a joint, and a lot of people are getting, from what I see, they get a lot of tennis elbow or golfer's elbow type of issues. Really, the best thing I would say is, you want to probably take measures before getting injured, and that will be a good warm up. And I think the Gripedo sand application is low impact, and it's mainly concentric, similar to sleds. Okay. And because of that, I think it's a good, if you're for example, if you're going to do a heavy deadlift day, or heavy farmer carries and things like that, or really anything, even heavy bicep curls or any tricep work, bench work, I would use it as a tool to warm up the joints, and after the workout, I would use it as a finisher, and just to pump blood into the tissue. Kind of like a drop set, so just to get blood into the tissue and get the waste, pump it out. Towards then, I would recommend that. And for athletes that are doing sports as finishers, since it is low impact, and if you want to push your athlete, it's a good medium to be able to push an athlete with less risk of injury, if that makes sense. Similar to like using like an air-dyne, pushing athletes, or hill sprints. If you're uphill, because you can't go full speed. Well, yeah, you can because of the gravity and the angle, but you can really push your lungs, and really you can get your heart rate up. So, and plus the angle on hill sprints, for example, it's a little bit easier on the knees and the joints. So it's a tool for finishers, or even sleds. You can just push athletes with less risk of injury, and for that conditioning. For those finishers, it can be a good tool as well, and we have a lot of athletes using it for that.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you for that. I think it's
sure.
It's one of the things that people tend to overlook. I come from a world where I started out in like bodybuilding, which transferred to powerlifting, and that transferred to after the mixed martial arts, and that transferred to like strongman type style of training. And now it's like a hybrid of everything. I do accessories. The thing that's funny, I used to love training arms. Now it's my least favorite thing to do.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's really funny. I do like doing tricep movements, but not like cable type stuff. I like to under load. So like a JM press or a close grip bench press, or I'll do like moderate weight, high repetition, a little bit more narrow, like overhead standing presses, things like that. I don't know. I don't get like a rush from it in a sense, but as I'm getting older and like things are starting to hurt more and more, I do enjoy it. Like I'll actually warm up with like a cable tricep just to shove blood in there and get everything working and not creaking. I did want to switch gears just a little bit because this was the thing that got you and I conversing in the first place. I posted something, I think this was in June or May, I can't remember. It was during the summer, and it was a quote, and I'm going to read the quote. I think I pulled it up. Should any man tell you that the mountain had changed its place, you are at liberty to doubt it if you think fit. But if anyone tells you that the man has changed his character, do not believe it. And this was a quote from Mehmed the Conqueror, or in Arabic is Muhammad. And he was the man responsible for really the demise of the last Roman emperor, and he was the guy that conquered Constantinople in 1453, which triggered a conversation between you and I, and we went on this deep dive conversation, which blew my mind because I had just watched the documentary on Netflix because I love documentaries. I love history, especially like war history. I find there's a lot of things that you can learn because people tend to think war and it's just no, it's not just war. It's tactic, it's mentality, it's toughness, it's grit, it's discipline, it's seeing things through. Like you have to read between the lines. So I wanted you to discuss a little bit about why that struck you so much and what your take on I guess his reign and what he really did and why it was so impactful to you and to the world.
Well, I saw that, and Mehmet II. He's someone he's an idol. I'm absolutely obsessed with what he's done. There's been many times and many folks that try to conquer Istanbul. It was almost deemed impossible, and he was able to do that at a very young age. I think it was like 18, 19 years old. And in the Ottoman history, he's the number one strategist. A lot of historians will see him as the number one. They don't think there's anyone really better than him. Arguably, Ataturk, which is actually towards the end of the Ottoman Empire, he was the person that led the independence war of Turkey. He's a really good strategist too. He was an absolute genius. But really, they're both are my favorite. He's a incredibly smart guy. But for me, what I really like about Mehmet II is another quote he has, and a strategy he used during the siege. And it's something my dad from a young age would always teach me. My dad would always tell me to be brave enough to think different, even if it sounds crazy. Always be willing to think, why not? Why not? Give it a try. Even if it's crazy, you never know what's going to happen. What's the worst going to happen? And he would always tell me that. And over the years, I saw a quote, and I think I sent it to you from Robin Williams. It said something along, we all have a piece of madness, and you must not lose it. And when I saw that, it resonated with what my dad always used to teach me, and it's something that helped me with a lot of things. But one thing, Mehmet, in one of his quotes he has is, he basically says, if they're smart enough to put a chain to stop our ships, we are mad enough to run our ships on land. And to me, I absolutely just really love that. And in the documentary, they cover that Mehmet, that one strategy was the key thing for them to take on Istanbul, because the Byzantine Empire, excuse me, they had chains that would block the ships of the Ottoman Empire, but with those chains they were able to lower it and get help from the outside ships that supported them, that would bring soldiers, food, and everything. And that always has been a problem in the past for any king or leader that wanted to take Istanbul. But what Mehmet II did was they found a way to be able to run their ships on land. They cut big tree trunks and put grease on them. And one night they put the ships on it, and it was I think it's a couple miles. And they just pretty much ran the ships on land. And next morning, the Byzantine Empire wakes up and they have all these Ottoman ships. And that was like probably one of the most important things that changed the outcome of the war. And me too, just like you, I really love studying not just Ottoman Empire, all great empires and leaders. There's so much to learn from a lot of them. And it's more than just war. It's grit, like you said, it's strategy, it's thinking, it's leadership. And if having a decision and if it's bold, to be able to stand behind it and to execute it, really, because just because you have a great idea doesn't mean you're going to be able to execute it. So, knowing how that played out and knowing his quote and knowing Turkish culture, to me, that meant a lot, because I think Turkish culture, there's a book, one of my favorite books, it's called Those Crazy Turks. It's about the independence war of Turkey and how they fought 7 countries. And to me, that was really inspiring, because at that time, I think Time magazine wrote about it. They said, what a foolish dream. The old man is going to fight 7 young thugs. And the old man was referred to Turkey because, at that time, Ottoman Empire, because they're old, they're falling apart. But reading that book, the stories just absolutely inspire me, and it's absolutely mad, absolutely crazy, some of the stories I read, and because of that, it has a lot of meaning to me. But if you look back, like the Wright brothers, when they're coming up with the airplane, it's a crazy idea. They're like mad. They're like, you're gonna fly? At that time, it is. Or if you listen to Elon Musk, like when he first started talking about colonizing, and visiting, the tours he wants for outer space and all that, it is, mad. But that's the mentality you really need to have if you want to make a difference, if you want to make breakthroughs, and those are the ones that really succeed. And that's something my dad taught me from a young age, and just having the willing to try it.
Yeah, it reminds me, it's like and I agree with you so much, because it's those that think that they're crazy enough that they can change the world are the ones that generally do. Mm-hmm. And you don't necessarily have to be a mover and shaker of like this monumentous, right, ordeal. But to the extent of like, why second guess yourself? Why think that you cannot achieve the thing that you can't achieve? Like, who's stopping you from doing so? Like, if you want to read 100 books in a month, do it. Nobody's going to tell you not to. The only person that's going to stand in between you and your goal is yourself. That's it. Period. Done. End of sentence. I did want to say, just going back on like the historical thing, one of my favorite books was 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Now, there's a stigma behind this book because it's like, oh, you're trying to learn how to manipulate and learn how to do this. It's not that. It's historical findings by great leaders and connectors and builders and scientists that he takes the most stringent, most like monumentous lesson and places it in like this very easy to understand way, and then you also get to learn a little bit of historical figures. And what's cool about the 48 Laws of Power is that anything that really sticks with you, you can then go and research that historical figure and then learn more about them, and that's how you get introduced to all these different things.